Sonic Battle is easily one of the most fascinating Sonic games out there. I have no real memories attached to this game, apart from trying to play it on an emulator for the first time back in 2014 or 2013. In terms of development history, there's not a lot of info. However, while Dimps were usually the ones who made the handheld games at the time, more specifically the Advance trilogy, Sonic Battle was credited to Sonic Team. I'm gonna assume this was handled by the Japan team, since Sonic Team USA was kinda busy crunching on Sonic Heroes. Apart from this, I literally can't find anything else about Battle's development, but there is some concept art. One of them shows what I'm assuming is an early title for the game, Sonic Battle Stadium, which I've never seen before and it looks pretty interesting. Aside from that, Sonic Retro's development page also included these sketches of Amy, and early pieces of official artwork for Sonic and Shadow. They look very Sega Saturn here, especially with Sonic having a spine sticking up. It's pretty cool seeing Sonic Battle's art style slowly taking shape here. I'll say this now, but I love Sonic Battle's official artwork. It looks so badass and cool. It's very comic booky, especially if you look at the Japanese box art. I also like comparing the cover arts for Sonic Battle and Mario Strikers, mainly since they look so similar to each other. It's pretty sick. The game would first be shown off at E3 2003, and that's kind of all I have to discuss. Seeing how this can be one of the more obscure Sonic games for people, I really wish there was more development info I could talk about. Hell, even on the cutting room floor page for Sonic Battle, it only really features unused dialogue boxes as cut content since, spoiler alert, Sonic Battle has a heavy amount of dialogue in its story mode. I guess it should be noted that Sonic Battle was the second time the series got a fighting game, the first one being the arcade classic, Sonic the Fighters, originally released in 1996. I'm not a fighting game person, but Fighters was a wacky and fun little game with a lot of charm to it. It's also gotten a decent following over the years, especially due to the fact that it was ported on Gems Collection, and the HD port you can get on Xbox and PS3. Kinda wish it came to Steam though. It especially gets more points when it comes to the inclusion of some very obscure and even forgotten characters like Fang, Bark, Bean, and the oh-so-lovable Honey the Cat. That's not sarcasm, I legitimately love her design. And the HD port would even let her be playable if you hover over Amy and press the start button. I think it's adorable, especially when you consider that her and Amy were besties in the comics back then, which is awesome. But anyways, Fighters was back in the classic era, so making another Sonic-based fighting game around the early 2000s made a lot of sense. It was also a really good idea considering how expanded the Sonic cast had gotten by that point. Sonic Battle was intended to be released side by side with Sonic Heroes, which ended up happening in December 2003 for Japan. Sorta. For whatever reason, despite the games releasing side by side in other regions, Japan received Sonic Battle much earlier on December 4th, and didn't get Sonic Heroes until December 30th. What the hell? At first glance, this isn't really a major issue, but this can actually kinda mess with the continuity when you're playing through the story. I'll address this later, but anyone familiar with the game should know exactly what I'm referring to. As a kid, I always found it a bit interesting that the title and the logo for the game appear to be taken from the GameCube port of SA2, which was Sonic Adventure 2 Battle. I'm not sure if there's any other connections with these two games, aside from obvious story points, but to my knowledge, SA2 Battle and Sonic Battle don't seem to share any kind of features or compatibility if you try connecting both using the GameCube link cables. Just like the other Advance games, despite having a Game Boy SP growing up, I never got a chance to play any of the Sonic games on the handheld. Like I said earlier, I first played the game on an emulator as a teen. I thought the game looked pretty sick, but I didn't get very far in the story. While I personally don't have any attachment to this game, one of my cousins, Andrew, told me he apparently had this game growing up. Andrew isn't a Sonic fan, the games just aren't really his thing, though he did try out Sonic Mania and he really enjoyed it. But in terms of other Sonic games, he told me at one point that he did have Sonic Battle while growing up and thought it was a lot of fun. I just thought that would be interesting to share, so I guess if this review's for anyone, it's for Andrew, if he's even watching. Jumping right into the game, this is easily one of the most hefty stories ever written for a Sonic game, and the majority of it is told through text. The writer, or more so the story mode planner, was Asahiko Kiku. To my knowledge, he hasn't written or worked on the story for any other game in the series. The only other credits he get for the franchise would be for doing the level design in Shadow the Hedgehog. He also worked on the Night sequel on Wii, Journey of Dreams, but I never played it. The story mode consists of 8 character episodes, but unlike the adventure games where those games stories were following the same plot, just being retold from each character or site's perspective, the story mode in Sonic Battle, apart from a few flashbacks, is actually ongoing, having each episode pick up right where the other one left off. So the plot starts with Sonic's episode, opening with Dr. Eggman in his base working on a new robot of sorts, but it's refusing to listen to what he says, so he decides to just dump the robot on a nearby beach. The robot is apparently known as a Gizoid, pronouncing it with a G because there's no way it sounds right with a J, and the Gizoid ends up being discovered by Sonic. Sonic realizes the robot doesn't really know where it is and only seems to speak in ellipses, so he decides to take it to Tails' house. By the way, in this game, Tails has both a house and a lab in the same vicinity. Okay, is Foxboy rich or something? Anyways, as Sonic is taking the robot back to Tails, he ends up bumping into Shadow? Okay, this needs to be addressed. Remember how Sonic Battle and Sonic Heroes were supposed to be released side by side everywhere, but for some reason Japan got it a few weeks early? Well, Battle is supposed to take place after the events of Heroes, so that's why Shadow's back and acting like normal, along with the fact that no one else is surprised that he's back even though he died in SA2. Shadow, by the way, is the first character you end up fighting. I'm not talking about the gameplay yet, but Shadow is like one of the strongest characters in the game, so having this be the first fight is pretty intense. It turns out both Shadow and even Rouge are trying to track down the Gizoid, who we learn is named Emerald. By the way, I'm pronouncing his name Emerald as a play on the word emerald, because I think it's cute and probably what the developers had in mind. Though according to a friend of mine, the Jazzy Man, he tried to argue that his name isn't pronounced Emerald, but apparently Emerald. Yeah, I don't get it either. Literally, any other person I've talked to mentioned this character always calls him Emerald, so it doesn't matter. Also, remember the other Gizoid in Sonic Advance 3? His name was Gemerald. Get it? It's a play on the words gem and emerald? It's simple and clever. Well, not to Jazzy though. He also tried to claim that that character is actually meant to be called G-Merle. No, I'm sorry Jazzy, but that sounds stupid. And being real, I think he'd probably prefer to call the character Emerald over what the English dub of Sonic X called him, which was Amel, mainly because they mistranslated the character's name. So way to go, 4Kids. With that said, go check out David Get Keen on Steam. Wishlist it now, it looks sick. Back to battle. After the encounter with Shadow, Sonic brings Emerald back to Tails and try to figure out what this robot's all about, and why the other characters are trying to track him down. They eventually realize that Emerald is capable of copying other characters' moves, and can also grow stronger after collecting a Chaos Emerald. At the same time, Eggman decides to send out his own Gizoid replicas, known as Phis. When I was younger, I straight up thought he called them Phils, and he sends them to go rob some jewelry stores and such, along with Sonic and company having to fight them. A lot. Like, a fuck ton of lot. Not only are the Phis out there causing trouble, but there's also Gamma? What? Didn't he literally die in Adventure 1? Well, it turns out these are just replica copies of Gamma. You know, kinda similar to the ones that also appeared in Adventure 2. The game even makes a point of having the characters recognize and name drop Gamma, but also has them realize it's not actually him, just a different model entirely. These are called the Chaos Gammas, and just like the Phi Gizoids, you end up fighting them several times. Okay, so while Eggman's robots are out causing a ruckus, Sonic and Tails are trying to figure out more about Emerald, and decide to take him to see Knuckles in order to give him one of his Chaos Emeralds. However, Knuckles mistakes Emerald for being one of Eggman's robots that robbed the jewelry store earlier, so they end up fighting. After battling Knuckles twice, he gives in and lets Sonic and Tails give the Chaos Emerald to Emerald. Give the Chaos Emerald to Emerald. Try saying that 5 times fast. Which leads to Emerald uttering his first words, much to the shock of Sonic and Tails, which is where Sonic's episode ends. Next is the Tails episode. As Sonic is training Emerald, Tails decides he's going to figure out more about Emerald's history. After getting access to the Central Lab in Central City, he finds out that Emerald is a Gizoid, which is a robot that was built in the ancient ruins, along with uncovering some restricted information from the lab that reveals that Professor Gerald Robotnik, Eggman's grandfather, also performed some experiments on Emerald a long time ago, close to the time he was working on Shadow. But once Tails uncovers this information, the security bots at the Central Lab activate, which are just gray gammas, and it leads to Tails and Emerald needing to battle them. Twice, oh for the love of God. So I'd usually save talking about the gameplay for after talking about the story, but Sonic Battle kinda complicates things for me since I feel like 75% of the time, you're just reading a bunch of text boxes. This is definitely a story-focused Sonic game. So for the Sonic fans who watch my stuff and claim they only care about the gameplay and not the story, Sonic Battle kinda gives those fans the middle finger because the gameplay is not really that special. I will say first and foremost, I'm not really a fighting game expert, so I'm probably the least qualified person to discuss this genre, but just talking about the gameplay from my own experience, and probably the most impressive part of the game, Sonic Battle is not a 2D fighting game. It actually has you fighting in these these 3D battle arenas, which looked really incredible for the Game Boy Advance, and I didn't notice any slowdown or glitchy graphics anywhere, so this aspect got pulled off insanely well. You can move around freely in this 3D space, and while the perspective can sometimes get in the way of fighting, I personally never had too many issues landing hits on enemies. For the basic controls, you press B to punch, and you can usually button mash to use different combos by tapping a direction on the D-pad. You can also press the R button to use a special attack, which can be crucial for beating fights, at least if you're an inexperienced fighting game player like me. You can also heal your character by holding the L button. How fast you can heal depends on the character. However, healing can also help you charge a meter above your health bar. Once that meter's filled, your character starts glowing, and when you land a special attack, you'll instantly kill the other characters. That is fucking awesome. So the basic fighting mechanics are fine, but the ground movement is actually a lot better than I was expecting. Using the D-pad in a 3D space isn't too bad, but I'd highly recommend playing this game with an analog stick because it controls pretty well. More specifically, play this game on the GameCube's Game Boy player with a GameCube controller. It feels perfect. It's almost like they built the game around using it. Also, I'm not sure if this was a feature from the Game Boy player itself or the GBI interface software I used to record footage, but the Y button on the controller can be used as a turbo button, so you can hold that and use rapid attacks or a dash move that every character has. It's really convenient and sick. So, the gameplay is pretty solid and impressive for a handheld title back in 2003. So, what's the issue? Well, apart from the battle arenas looking different and varied, this is kind of all the gameplay has to offer. It wouldn't be too bad, but Sonic Battle is way too big on having you repeat the same fights over and over again with no major changes. That is the biggest problem with Sonic Battle. The gameplay in story mode is repetitive as hell. Far too many times does it make you fight the same two robot enemies at different points in several stories, but it even has you fight those same enemies immediately afterward too. So more often or not, the game just plays out like, oh, you fought another Phi/Gamma robot? Well, why don't you fight him again, but now there's two of them? Or, oh, you fought this character and had to knock them out 5 times? Well, do it again, but now you have to knock them out 10 times! The way the game is structured isn't fun, and it can make the story mode drag on way too much. And as the episodes go on, the fights just get progressively more difficult. It can even reach a point where you'll probably spend an assload of time stuck on a really hard as hell fight because maybe you suck at fighting games like me. Seriously, the CPUs can be brutally unfair. Like, remember the special attack you can charge up and instantly kill characters with? Well, the CPUs can use that too, and it can be really irritating. Another issue, and this is more than likely because of the tiny Game Boy Advance screen, but why can't I see the other characters' health bars? It kinda sorta makes the fights more difficult for me when I'm not sure when the character I'm fighting is gonna die. One exploit I often used, which I discovered by accident when live streaming the game a few years ago, was that I would just mash the R button over and over again, which usually helped me win most of the fights by simply spamming, but that's obviously not fun either. This exploit only got me so far because not every character has special moves that you can abuse, so I hate to break this to any Sonic battlers watching, but I once again had to use a codebreaker device to finish the game. Again, I'll be the first to say I suck at fighting games, and I didn't feel too good about cheating, but with the way the game's laid out, it was taking way too long for me to finish. The main cheat I used was winning fights by pressing select, which was pretty helpful mainly when it came to skipping those really stupid repeat fights, because being honest, I really don't feel like playing those again. Another aspect about this game is that you can play as Emerald, who starts out playing horribly, but the main gimmick with him is that after fights he can collect these character cards, which can help him learn new moves and improve his gameplay. Yeah, you can customize Emerald by using these cards. It's a pretty great concept, though it's kinda made more tedious by this game's insanely repetitive and dragged out gameplay. You probably won't reach a decently playable Emerald until around probably Knuckles episode, which at that point you're halfway through the game. So overall, the gameplay for Sonic Battle, on its own, can be a lot of fun at first, but the way the story mode handled it was really underwhelming. Yeah, I'm just getting the gameplay out the way now so I can focus on the rest of the story without needing to stop, but I will say this, when playing with the right people, I'm sure the multiplayer for this game must be loads of fun. I know Johnny said in his Sonic spin-offs video that there was no way people were using their GBA link cables for anything other than Pokemon, but Johnny, shut the fuck up. Multiplayer Sonic Battle, I'm sure, has to be a lot of fun with friends, especially if you're able to master the mechanics and everything. I hope to experience it someday. Put it on Switch, cowards! Getting back to the story, remember how Tails learned that Gerald Robotnik did experiments on Emerald? Well, it turns out Shadow was going after Emerald to destroy him before the Gizoid collects all the Chaos Emeralds and reaches his true power, which is why Shadow usually appears in most of the episodes. Oh, and Rouge? Well, she goes after Emerald after learning that Eggman's going after him too, but she discovers that the robot already made a link with Sonic. This means Emerald can only listen to Sonic's commands, and won't obey anyone else until Sonic himself tells him to. So through some pretty clever dialogue, Rouge tricks Sonic into letting Emerald follow her commands. Despite noticing a few typos, I actually really enjoy the writing in this game. It kept me invested and often had me chuckling over the character interactions, with Rouge tricking Sonic easily being one of my favorite moments. It even leads to a funny bit where Sonic teases Knuckles by telling Emerald to never listen to him. What a bitch. So we know why Shadow's initially going after Emerald, but what does Rouge want him for? Well, in the third episode, which is Rouge's, we find out it's because she just wants to train Emerald to help her rob jewelry stores. I mean, she is a thief. What else were you expecting? Just like with Tails, Rouge has her own place in this game where she can train Emerald, known as Club Rouge, which is probably one of my favorite battle arenas in the game. I love the pinball stuff here, even though you can't really interact with any of it. Oh yeah, Rouge's episode is also where Amy appears for the first time, and Amy. Well, when she first shows up, she hears about how Sonic has been training this robot he found, and she interprets this as Sonic training to be a dad, so she decides to take the role of being Emerald's mother, even asking him to call her that, so she could try to impress Sonic and raise Emerald as their baby. This somehow gets stranger later. So after Rouge takes Emerald, Amy tries to go after her to stop her from whatever she has planned, even leading to a fucking annoying battle where she loses horribly. And then a second fight happens where she and a vision of Sonic appears to help, and the Sonic CPU is really brutal. It's a terrible fight. Why did the game make me play this? But eventually Rouge discovers that Emerald has a good heart and isn't really fit for a jewel thief, so she just returns him to Sonic. That's literally how her episode ends. I gotta say, I really hated the fight with Amy, but I kinda like how, in context, Amy explained to Emerald that she's basically his mom, and then later on Rouge basically makes Emerald fight his mother, which is pretty outlandish when you really think about it. It's probably one of the game's best unintentional laugh out loud moments. The fourth episode is for Knuckles, and by this point of the game, Emerald has learned quite a lot, to a point where he's now speaking in full sentences, talking and behaving mostly like Sonic. Since Knuckles is aware of how powerful Emerald's becoming, he decides to try training him too. They end up getting ambushed a few times by Eggman's Phi Gizoids, but in the process, they discover that shards of the emeralds are inside the Phis, so they collect enough of them and take them back to Tails, who can use the shards to create another emerald, which he of course gives the Emerald. So at this point in the game, he now has 3 of the 7 Chaos Emeralds. Oh, and one kind of funny detail here is that for some reason in every cutscene, when Emerald gets a Chaos Emerald, they're always green. I don't know if this was just an oversight, or maybe they just didn't think Sonic fans would be weird enough to catch this detail. Plus, all the emeralds being green here kinda reminds me of how they were all blue in Sonic Spinball. I think there was also 16 of them in that game, kinda like how there were 8 of them in Sonic the Fighters. Anyways, after Knuckles' episode, it's Amy's turn. And while I have enjoyed the story and the way the characters were written so far, Amy is probably the one character that just feels off. We already saw it earlier by how she decides to be this protective mother figure for Emerald, treating it as if she and Sonic have a baby, which personally I didn't mind at first. Remember, she did want to marry Sonic in Heroes, and since battle is supposed to take place afterward, I'm guessing this was supposed to be an expansion on that. However, my main issue with Amy in battle is she's weirdly mean. Her dialogue can come off extremely aggressive at points. It just feels strange. Amy's episode is also where we first get to see Cream and Cheese, and she's even being mean to them too, along with forcing both of them to fight her and Emerald in a training exercise she calls Boxercise. It's weird enough, but then the game explains that she's doing these Boxercise workouts to lose weight and improve her figure? When the hell did Amy ever care about her body? And why the fuck is she being so mean to Cream? What did Cream do? And where the hell is Vanilla? Oh, remember how Tails had his own house and Rouge has her own nightclub? Well, Amy has her own apartment. Yes, she has her own place, and Cream appears to be living with her too. Once again, where is your mother? As weird as the Boxercise plot is, I do like the aesthetic of Amy's room. The pink is really nice, and I love the Sonic rug. It's cute. Regardless, Amy's writing is still weird and sorta just ends with Emerald realizing Cream is a far better friend to have. Made even more apparent by how Cream's episode happens right afterward. Cream's episode is a bit more basic, but her place here is actually pretty vital for Emerald's character development. Cream pretty much teaches Emerald to understand emotions like being sad, and it's kinda heartfelt to watch. In my Advance 2 review, I commented about how Cream is one of my favorite characters, and seeing her be the one to teach Emerald about emotions is really awesome. Plus, her fighting style has Cheese assisting her like in the other games, which is a lot of fun. Oh, and there was one bit during the episode where Cream asked one of the Gamma robots, "What are you fighting for?" and it just made me burst out laughing.
What am I fighting for?
The second to last episode is with Shadow, and this is probably where I found the plot to be the most interesting. It helps expand on Shadow's backstory with Professor Gerald, and how both he and Emerald were experimented on around the same time. Plus, I would probably say Shadow's the best character to play as. His moves and powers are really satisfying to use, though the one detriment to him is that he heals really slow. What the hell, I thought he was supposed to be the ultimate life form. Why is it taking so long for him to charge up? So Shadow tracks down Emerald, no longer wanting to destroy him, but wants to figure out why both of them were made, being weapons of war as he puts it. By this point of the story, Emerald has 6 of the Chaos Emeralds, and the last one is with Shadow, but he refuses to part with it not only because of his fears of Emerald reaching his full power, but also because a part of Maria lies with him and the Chaos Emerald. Yeah, this game is supposed to take place after Heroes and before the Shadow game, and at this point, Shadow appears to already know who Maria and Professor Gerald are, along with being fully aware of who he appears to be, and why Maria is such an important figure in his life. Rouge even drops by later and tells Shadow about how he was Gerald's ultimate weapon, the ultimate life form. This exact scenario is something I complained about both Heroes and the Shadow game for never doing, but here's Sonic Battle coming along and playing out the scenario like it's no big deal. Fucking what even is the continuity for this series anymore? Thanks, Izuka. Anyway, Shadow and Emerald head to Eggman's base, which is called Gimme Shelter, how do you even pronounce it? And upon learning that both of them were made to help bring hope to humanity, Shadow decides to give his Chaos Emerald to Emerald. This shocks Rouge, but he tells her that he's okay with this because he will always be with Maria, so he doesn't need the Chaos Emerald. It's a pretty touching moment and a great highlight for Shadow's character. Fuck you, dude. After activating Emerald's true power, Shadow decides to challenge Emerald to a fight in order to see who between the two is the most powerful. This was a really fun scenario, and it's probably my favorite battle in the game. Not to mention, with the advent of that Sonic X Shadow Generation short Dark Beginnings, which reveals that Shadow and Emerald actually fought each other decades prior, it adds a bit more backstory to their fight and battle. Also, seeing Emerald pop up again in new Sonic media is pretty crazy. Like, I seriously made this review at the right time. As great as this fight is, sadly that's not where Shadow's episode ends, since he makes Emerald go fight the other characters too, which while I do understand needing to have him do this from a story perspective, it just once again makes the gameplay far more repetitive like before. But the 8th and last episode is for Emerald. Dr. Eggman, frustrated that his Phi Gizoids and Chaos Gammas failed him, hasn't given up on his plans for world domination. Sonic and company find out that Eggman built a new Death Egg, wouldn't this be Mark III or some shit? And he also has a weapon on board called the Final Egg Blaster, which he plans on using to take over the world. Tails takes Sonic and Emerald to the Holy Summit in order to use a transporter he built, but when they arrive, Knuckles explains that the reappearance of the Death Egg caused a river near the top of the summit to freeze over. And not only that, but Chaos reawakened? Yes, the actual Chaos! Unless this is a copy or something, then would that make this Chaos Chaos? He doesn't actually have any involvement with the story itself, aside from needing to beat him in order to access the Death Egg. He's one of the strongest enemies to fight, but he's also really slow, so you can thankfully use that to your advantage in the fight. Well, Tails activates his transporter, and Emerald gets sent to the Death Egg to face off against Eggman. Twice. God damn it, Sonic Battle, not again. But after defeating Eggman, he fakes surrender in order to distract Emerald. The Doctor, while being in the presence of the Final Egg Blaster device, manages to create a link with Emerald, meaning Eggman finally gained control of Emerald like he was plotting to the entire game. Except, no. In a sudden turn of events, Emerald completely changes into the very weapon of war that Shadow feared, completely overpowering Eggman and taking control of the Final Egg Blaster, aiming it right at Earth. The other characters see this from afar, and Sonic decides to be sent up to the Death Egg in order to snap Emerald out of it. However, this doesn't work. So without any better solution, Sonic decides to fight Emerald in order to save the world, which leads to the true final boss, where you're shockingly not Super Sonic, but then again I guess it's a role reversal because Emerald's the one who has all the Chaos Emeralds. And this might be my second favorite fight in the game, right behind the one with Shadow and Emerald from the previous episode. There are two major reasons I love this fight, the first being from a story perspective. Seeing Emerald get overpowered and turn on everyone is pretty heartbreaking, especially if you enjoyed watching his development in every episode. The other reason I love this fight is mainly from a gameplay perspective. Like, throughout the campaigns, you're collecting a bunch of these character cards, and progressively using them to improve Emerald's fighting style, and just overall making him stronger and better. So to have the game end with you as Sonic having to fight the very robot that you helped improve and make more powerful, it's incredibly clever and also pretty goddamn terrifying if you think about it. It's sad and tragic. But at the same time, it's a very effective and well executed final boss, and it might honestly be one of my all-time favorites in the series. Oh, and the best part? You only have to fight Emerald once. Thank God. So upon defeating Emerald, he snaps out of his destructive behavior but is very badly damaged from the fight. Then, in probably one of the darkest endings in the series, Emerald recognizes that he's damaged beyond repair and begins counting down, eventually self-destructing. Yeah, Emerald doesn't make it. He dies. Even sadder, before he goes, he bids farewell to everyone he's ever met, even still calling Amy his mom. Okay, as weird as that part of the plot was, that detail is still really sad. It's an incredibly downer ending for the game, but I kinda respect that Sonic Battle had the guts to do this. It even attempts to deliver a pretty serious message about no longer needing weapons or wars, and then maybe the world could finally be peaceful someday. Okay, it's still trying to deliver all this in text with a bunch of cartoon animal characters, but I'm not saying it's perfect. I just respect that they did this in a Sonic game is all. Despite Emerald's death, there is a bit of hope at the very end. While everyone is devastated that Emerald's gone, Sonic says they shouldn't fret because an Emerald Shard ends up being found, meaning a piece of Emerald can still live on. This pretty much sets up the future character, Gemerald, who would later appear in Sonic Advance 3. And unlike Emerald, Gemerald would receive a much happier ending, getting to live in peace with Cream and Vanilla. How sweet. Seriously, where the hell was Vanilla during this whole mess? And that was the story and overall experience of Sonic Battle. Repetitive gameplay aside, it's honestly a really fun journey. If you guys love the adventure era characterization, Battle delivers it really well here. You know, with the exception of Amy's weird crap. This game gave me a lot of funny and even cathartic character moments, some interactions that I'll always remember, and a cool new character with an arc and ending that'll always stick with me. The prospect of war and world peace are pretty major and heavy topics for a Sonic game to tackle, but at the same time, it's a nice follow-up to some of the darker themes in Adventure 2, and Battle doesn't go too overboard with it either. The sad but hopeful ending is also just really nice foreshadowing to Sonic Advance 3, which is my favorite Advance game. I really adore that while Battle technically isn't an Advance game, it still has close connections to the trilogy. In a way, it almost makes the handheld trilogy a tetralogy if you're looking at this from a story perspective. Another cute detail with Sonic Battle are the voice clips. This game features the Adventure/Heroes era voice cast, and you mostly hear the character voices during the battle arenas, but on several occasions, the dialogue boxes can feature the characters uttering random phrases, and I just think that's really charming. This was probably my favorite voice cast in the entire franchise, so hearing them talk throughout the game is a lot of fun, along with being pretty impressive for the GBA sound capabilities, which would also be carried over to Advance 3. Battle is also one of the few other times we get to hear William Corkery as Tails, and Sarah Woolfolk as Cream, at least when it comes to hearing their voices outside of Heroes. And this might just be my favorite vocal performance of Rouge from Lani Minella. I feel like she really captured the vibe of Rouge perfectly in these voice clips. I seriously can't get enough of it. Hi, sugar. I think these were likely recorded around the same time everyone was doing their lines for Sonic Heroes, but one thing I found kinda cool is that John St. John is also in the game, but he's not voicing Big or Omega. Instead, he's voicing Gamma. Yeah, I'm guessing Lani Minella felt his voice was a pretty good substitute, considering Gamma's original voice actor Steve Brody sadly passed away 2 years before this game. I think it was a great choice too, just sounding like a neat variation of John's Omega voice. Initiating recovery mode. So, funny story, the first time I met Ryan Drummond, who was the voice of Sonic during this era of games, it was at Sonic Revolution 2019. I had him sign a bunch of games that I brought with me, which included my copies of Sonic Battle and Advance 3 since he did voice Sonic in those games, but I didn't have the boxes for either game at the time, so I just had him sign the tiny GBA carts. He didn't mind, he was pretty cool about it. Oh yeah, I even got him to sign my copies of Blue Stinger and Sonic Shuffle at Sonic Revolution 2024. Just felt like sharing that. I was pretty happy that he remembered Blue Stinger. It's such an obscure little Dreamcast launch title that I only really know about because of Oni Plays, so thank you, Ding Dong. The voice clip sounding so good also kinda highlights how great I think this game's soundtrack is too. Seriously, Sonic Battle might just have one of my all-time favorite Sonic soundtracks ever. It's probably the most heavy metal soundtrack in the series, and it's on a damn Game Boy Advance game. Seriously, just from the opening menus, this game's soundtrack is fucking fire. It has a fantastic variety too. The towns you walk around in can have some pretty catchy and relaxing music, while the battle arenas can have some pretty intense and kick-ass songs in them. Even some levels like Club Rouge and the Holy Summit Crater can sound funky as hell. Here's a few samples. I'd even go as far to say the music in the Death Egg and the final boss theme could easily be used in a regular Sonic platform game. Both of them would fit amazingly. Hell, the soundtrack is so good that one of the missions in Sonic Generations would feature an awesome remix of Emerald Beach, which was done by one of Sonic Battle's original composers, Kenichi Tokoi. That's really fucking cool, and it's easily one of the best remixes in Generations. Seriously, Sonic Battle has a fantastic soundtrack. There's so much here for me to just love. Remember the praises I gave to this game for its connections with Advance 3? Well, the music even does that too. The game's second staff roll music, which you hear at the end of Emerald's episode, sounds so similar to the staff roll that would later appear in Advance 3. It's almost like a precursor to it. So as Sonic Advance 3's biggest defender, I just love this connection so much. And it was pretty great foreshadowing if you think about it. So, look, if you can't stomach playing through this whole game, give the music a listen on its own. It is terrific and I can't praise it enough. In terms of extra content, there's obviously the multiplayer mode that I alluded to earlier. I've never really played it for myself, but I imagine it has to be a lot of fun if you're capable of getting a session going. You can fight in just about every battle arena in the story mode, and to make things cooler, after you finish Emerald's story, you can unlock Chaos as a playable character, and you unlock an extra battle arena. And guess what? It's Green Hill Zone, which I don't mind. Like, come on, considering the time this game came out, it was still pretty cute to do this. And it was long before this level got overused to hell like in the future games. It also kinda reminds me of when Adventure 2 had this level as well. We even get a kick fucking ass remix of Green Hill too. It sounds so sick. And good on Nakamura-san for receiving a royalty check. In terms of other extras, there's a training mode for newbies like me who suck at this game. There's also a challenge mode where you can choose a character and fight everyone else in different pairings. It's pretty cool. As you complete the episodes, you can unlock some mini games that you can play by linking the game with another GBA. These are pretty decent time wasters, but I didn't really check them out for too long. I do like how the Minehunt minigame is just Minesweeper but with Knuckles. Plus, Radical Highway makes an appearance in the minigame Speed Demon, which is cute. The game also lets you replay the character stories from start to finish, and doing so will give you access to reading one of Gerald Robotnik's journals. So I guess if you really like Sonic Battle's story and wanted a bit more lore, then there you go. Though you could just look up the journals on the Sonic Wiki if you really wanted to read them. So, I guess one thing I'll mention is that in Emerald's episode, you can visit the Sonic Team building and input certain passwords, which can help you unlock certain rare character cards. It's pretty cool, but there's not much else to really say. You could also just look up the passwords online and just unlock everything that way. But I did want to point out a very interesting fun fact about these passwords. A few years ago, the late streamer Etika claimed that he actually got his username from one of these passwords in Sonic Battle. This was the Akita password, which unlocked the Chaos Combo card. So Desmond just swapped the K and T, and that's how we all came to see the Etika moniker. I wanted to make mention of this to pay respect to Etika. I didn't follow his live streams when he was still around, but I had plenty of friends who were huge fans of his, and it's pretty tragic to think that he's been gone 5 whole years now. Also, Etika and I share a birthday. He was born in 1990, I was born in 98, but he's still always on my mind whenever my birthday comes up. So I just wanted to thank him for all the entertainment he gave me and my friends, and may you rest in peace, Desmond. Joy-Con boys for life. And I think that just about wraps up all I have to say about Sonic Battle. It's a very unique game in the franchise that I'm sure has its own following. I enjoyed the story and the characterizations for the most part. The gameplay is impressive and solid, but is incredibly repetitive to the game's detriment. But in spite of my personal gripes, I still recommend playing this game if you haven't, especially if you're into fighting games and most likely cringed watching me cheat to the end. This doesn't play like a normal Sonic game, so in a way, it's probably a bit more accessible for some people. Again, my cousin Andrew really liked this game and he's not even a Sonic fan. It's got a fun and engaging story throughout it, and I think it really helps the game stand well. The soundtrack is fantastic too. I can't reiterate that enough. At the time of this review, Sonic Battle has never been ported, and it doesn't seem like Sega has any plans to port it either. As much as I would love to see the Advance Trilogy get re-released on either a future Sonic collection, or even the Switch's GBA Online app, I also really hope this doesn't lead to Sonic Battle getting left behind in the process. More fans should have access to this game without needing to emulate, or play the game on an actual GBA or DS, though I'd still say playing the game on the GameCube's GBA player is the best way to experience this game. Until that day comes when Battle and the rest of the Advance games are re-released, be sure to go check out these neat little Sonic titles in any way you can, and I guess this means I can finally wrap up my original intent of reviewing the mainline Sonic GBA games. Unless you're watching this in the GBA compilation video. If that's the case, then I hope you enjoy the next reviews. Crazy to think that the Advance 1 review was made back in February 2019, and it took me 5 frickin' years to finally wrap this up. So shout out to anyone who waited for this review and the Advance 2 review. There's just so much for me to say about this fast blue dork. So until next time, thank you once again for watching, and I'll see you all in the next review. Take care and have a good night.